honestly, I think that one of the most systemic problems in society is fatherlessness, across the board. I think that's one, like, I think so much could be solved by having, active, engaged, present dads and men. Um, so I think that was kind of at the heart of it, just kind of seeing just like, I think men just need to like step into leadership roles in their family. They need to take ownership of it. Stop being passive. Don't try to outsource the raising of your children, the spiritual leader. Like, sure, your church may have a wonderful kids program that's supplemental to what you should be doing as the leader of your family, right?
All right, welcome to the Wealth with Purpose podcast, and I'm excited about this episode. This is the information, the I don't know what to call it, but what's gonna come in this episode, I'm really excited about. I'm pumped about it, and I'm eager to know more. In this podcast episode, I have my friend Matt Green with me. What's going on, man? How's it going?
Tony, man, what's going on? I'm super grateful to be on.
Absolutely, brother. Well, I appreciate you accepting the invite. um yeah, this is gonna be interesting because I know I, I think you have one of the most powerful ministries, as far as like faith goes, and as far as like family goes, and honestly overall, Christian related. I think the ministry that you got going on, which we'll learn about in a second, to me is at the top of the list, at the top of the most important. So before we get into all of that, um, who is Matt Green? And from the day you were born and from the day that you met Jesus, what did that look like? Talk to me. What's going on?
Man, from birth here. So I was born in California. My dad was
Okay.
in the military, and so he was stationed in California at the time. Born in Riverside, California. We lived there like a whopping 6 months, I think, and then started the move every 2 years cycle.
Wow.
So I think we went California to Mississippi, Texas, Mississippi, South Carolina, Texas. So lots of move, and all
Man.
before I was 10. And so it was, a lot of meeting new friends. Kind of as soon as you got tight and got a good tight knit group of people,
They
up and
ship you
move.
off.
Yep. And so it was interesting because like it teaches you to be like really adaptable as a kid, like, and
Mhm.
you're having to like learn how to engage in new social circumstances like regularly. Like I was always like kind of a new kid in school growing up, and so that was a great lesson. But loved growing up in the military community. Just the camaraderie, the tightness across it. It was just like something I'm super grateful for.
Mhm.
And even to this day, like the military community is something that's like near and dear to me. So kind of going up through high school, we planted here. My dad retired here, being San Antonio, Texas. And I've been here most of my life. When people say, "Well, hey, where are you from?" I consider San Antonio, Texas, to be home.
Mhm.
And so Military City, USA, also. So that's super
Yeah.
neat. Went to college at UT Austin, studied finance and accounting. So I'm a finance professional by day, I guess, podcaster by night. And
And
so
we all.
yeah, so it's a blast, but kind of, I guess, taking a step back. So my first job in high school was a Golden Corral. That's a buffet, and I and so I actually met my wife that, like, then we didn't start dating for a while, and so I just kind of rewinded because tying back ultimately, kind of
Mhm.
where our paths crossed again. It wasn't until at UT that, so my senior year, she was a freshman. I was like, okay,
Mhm.
like, I'm finally gonna get the courage to ask her out, because I was, always super obsessed with studying and stuff in college, that I didn't
I
leave
thought you were
time.
gonna say super obsessed with your wife. I was like, what?
No, no, in college, like I was like I wouldn't have like wanted to subject anybody to trying to
Mm,
date college Matt. It was kind of a mess. And so yeah, and then graduated, went and started working in finance. Kind of have done a couple different things career wise between finance. I've been a product manager, um, been in real estate, as a realtor for a bit. So that's kind of more like on the vocational side. But
mhm,
from a faith standpoint, I don't like my most of my family's Catholic, so I kind of grew up in that kind of rhythm. Like, a lot of it we largely were Easter, Christmas growing up.
Mhm, mhm,
More my family was much more regular, but I always had like this innate like belief. Like even though like I wasn't regularly like attending church, or I didn't crack a Bible open until probably my 20s. Like I
mm,
always just had like this like innate belief. Like no, like I truly believe that there, is a God, there's a creator. I just you look around and like I just can't help but believe that this amazing, like Earth and how perfect, down to the degree, everything
yeah,
is just designed. I was just like, no, there's no way that this is an accident. So it wasn't until college I just found myself, like I kind of alluded to earlier, like kind of a mess. I was super like obsessed with studying. Like it was
mhm,
just like only thing that everything revolved around was like get the grades, get the grades, get the grades. So I was always hyper stressed out.
mhm,
And so, like, I made a point every night, like, I'm not gonna go to bed without praying before bed. Like, at least, like, at least I can do that, right?
yeah,
As a step. And then I found myself like not feeling peace at night unless I did. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And so then kind of fast forward, Eric and I started dating. She's always been, in church regularly, just, really, really, wonderful, kind of just like faith warrior.
mhm.
And we started dating. She's like, hey, like, if we're gonna date, like, we're going to church together. Like that's it's a non-negotiable for her, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, that's
Granted,
good.
I was terrified. I was so scared. I always tell people like I had this fear that so we go to a rather large church, and I was always scared that the lights were gonna go down and, like, a spotlight was gonna shine on me, and the pastor was gonna ask me a question I couldn't answer. I don't know, it was, like, this really irrational fear, and so it kinda started there, man, like, really kind of going from, like, really surface level, really lukewarm to, like, starting to read the Bible, and I started talking about, like, "Hey, I'm going to church with Erica," and more of my buddies were like, "Hey, like, cool, like, I go to church too, I'm a believer," and, like, I was like, "Oh, man," like, so many people in my sphere, I didn't even
Mhm,
realize it, and so, like, a couple of us got a little, men's Bible study together. We'd grab coffee before work, so a lot of us worked at USA together. We'd go, like, grab coffee in the cafe, and, I remember I think the very first one I did was the book of Joshua. I couldn't tell
mm,
you, like, a whole lot like what we talked about, like, it was just, like, being in community with, like, a couple of the buddies talking about,
yeah,
the Bible and Jesus. It was, like, it was so cool, and then it just kind of just grew and grew and grew. Like, I just loved it. I loved the community. I loved just learning, and then the relational piece of your faith just really starts to flourish when you spend more time in the Word and you make a more purposeful effort to just, like, grow. You spend more time in prayer. When you're in the Word, like, you're really just, like it's, like, a really special moment that you're just, you know people are like, "Oh, like, I don't hear from God." It's like, "No, God's like, this Bible, right, is God, and just,
yeah,
like, he breathed this through, like, and um, he speaks to us through scripture, and so it's just grown from there. Obviously, I've had some periods of life that have been tougher than others and some struggles where maybe my faith got rocked a little bit, and,
mhm.
but kind of all the way up to answer your question, like it was probably like fresh out of college, dating Erica. Really, my I think is when my faith really started to flourish.
Okay. All right, well, cool deal. There's several things I want to unpack from your story, if that's okay with you. First thing that I wrote down in my notes is you said your dad was military and you were
Mhm.
jumping all over the place. Were you first of all were your parents Christian? I assume. No, they weren't. Okay, well that's
My dad is not a believer,
mm,
and my mom was raised in a Catholic family. Would consider herself to be a believer, but is not like an
I got you.
active. Um, I guess I don't know how to describe it real well, but
Yeah,
I
I know what you mean.
yeah, consider myself kind of like first generation in my like the green lineage, I guess.
Yeah, it got to start with somebody, but that's awesome. I mean, that's how I wonder how do the conversations go about like if Christianity is ever brought up, like when you have either family reunions or family gatherings, does that ever come up?
It's a topic that I definitely made a point to like dance around. I'm not gonna
Mm,
lie, especially like early on because like I feel like I was still so like early
I got
in
you.
like in my journey, like that if I was like frankly like if someone like pushed on a topic or pushed on like
Mhm.
I didn't feel like I had um the biblical understanding to be like, oh well, this is why it was kind of like the apologetics piece where like I just didn't feel confident, so I just
Mhm.
wouldn't bring it up. And then over time, I've had a couple faith related conversations with my dad, and it's really interesting because he'll be like, it's not that I don't believe, it's just I
Yeah.
don't know. And
Yeah.
for him, he one of the examples he used that's kind of stuck with me. He was like, you know, a couple hundred years ago, a group of really smart guys got together and put together a document that we're still fighting over pretty hardcore, right? Like he's talking about alluding to the Constitution. He's like, well, what keeps that from happening a couple thousand years ago? People write things that, seem like pretty common sense. And yeah, so it's like, that's kind of how my dad's an engineer, math guy. Like
Mhm.
he needs to be able to like
See it to
see
believe
it.
it.
Exactly. And so like, so I was like, I get it, and so we've had some conversations. I think one of the coolest things is he listens to the podcast,
Oh,
in
that's good.
not being a believer, and he'll send me a text after an episode, like, "Hey, that was a really great conversation." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it means the world," because I'm like, he one like in my very first episode, it felt awkward for me to start because I'm starting a podcast about fatherhood and
Mhm.
like not wanting my dad to feel like, oh, like, hey, I'm starting something and I'm saying like how you did it or how you're doing it is wrong, because that's
Yeah.
not by any means my heart behind it. Um, and so yeah, my mom's like, I'm so glad that you've kind of like really leaned into it and grown. Um, but yeah, I think my dad, like I'm just kind of like just chipping away, just like
No, but
I'm
that's a
not giving
that
up.
yeah, yeah, no, that's a good thing, especially well, you mentioned something earlier that caught my attention, like, for you to become a Christian, for you to become a believer, you have to do Christian things, which in this case, is reading the Bible constantly, praying, hanging out around a Christian environment, hanging out around Christian people. Um, that's the way you grow your faith. I mean, a lot of people they call themselves Christians, and the last time they went to church was like 2 years ago,
Hmm.
or the last time they prayed was a while back. And I mean, if you're listening to this and you're one of those, I would encourage you to at least, just like you, Matt, at least make a simple goal to pray before you eat or pray before you go to sleep, something like that. And of course, attend church. But anywho, uh, oh, that I was getting to my point. So like your dad listening to your podcast, I mean, that is a believe it or not, that's a way to create a conversion in some way.
Hmm.
It may not be obviously somebody that's praying every hour, but it's definitely something for the better, I would think.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
absolutely agree. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like we cannot like convince somebody to like receive Jesus, right? That's ultimately the Holy Spirit that
right.
like pursues someone and kind of like convicts them and kind of draws them to like it's the pursuit of God,
Mhm.
right? And so like we can do the best that we can to like kind of show what that walk looks like, show what investing in a relationship with God is.
Mhm.
I'm reading a book called The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer. I don't know if you've heard of it, but like
Mm-mm.
he talks about in it, um, God is a person with a like personality. Like you can see like humor woven through the Bible, right? Like there's a
Mhm.
personality, there's a sense of humor, right? You don't get to know somebody's personality by one interaction or two
Yeah.
interactions or three interactions, right? It's like it's multiple interactions. Then you get to like really learn, kind of like get to know the person, right? It's getting to it. It's not, it's being in relationship. It's a relationship with Jesus, right? There's like the knowledge piece that like I think everybody kind of starts with, right? Like you read the Bible, you kind of learn, you learn the stories, you learn the lessons, but then like there's that step from knowledge to relationship.
Mhm.
So it's not just like this static, I'm gonna pray and I'm gonna hope it gets answered, and like it's just like it's something that you invest in,
Yeah.
and it's something you cultivate.
Absolutely. All right. Well, you mentioned, the podcast, Faith Forge Fathers, and I wanna dive deep into what this is, why you started this ministry, because I'll let you speak on it first, and then I'll ask some questions on it. But why Faith Forge Fathers, and what's the purpose for doing this podcast?
Oh, for sure. Funny enough, like it started like with the basic idea of just like I would love to have a podcast someday. I had no direction. I had
Yeah.
no topic. It was just kind of like I just like to talk. I love having conversations with people. I love
Hmm.
learning about people. I love learning about new topics, whatever it may be. I've kicked around ideas about having like a humory kind of fun thing with just a couple buddies, where we just kind of like make fun of each other and argue about stuff that still may come to fruition one day. But I remember just like finding myself like really wanting to improve as like the spiritual leader of my family,
Hmm.
and grow as a dad and a husband. And one day I was in the middle of a service, and I feel like it just got like I was like clear as day, just like do a podcast, faith, fatherhood, call it Faith Forge Fathers. I remember going home and I was like, "Hey Erica, this is the idea, this is the name." She's like, "I love it, do it." And like I'm a pretty slow mover. So I typically like I have a great idea, then it takes me like a couple years to make it happen. It was like from that point, the first episode was not even 2 weeks. It was just like
Mm.
we're just gonna like get whatever we can together and just make it happen. But I mean, at the heart of it was, man, like I think just wanting to like almost selfishly like
Hmm.
try to grow a man of Christ, as a father, and like just bring other men along, right? Like
Hmm.
my goal is always like I didn't start the podcast so I could tell or teach people how to be a good dad or but like I feel like I'm like in the audience too, and my job
Yeah.
is to bring on super wise men like you. Like I think was grateful to have you on. Um, and like, hey, let's just share our stories and our experiences and our faith walks. Where did we stumble? What have we found has like helped our
Hmm.
family thrive? Is it the cards at the dinner table that like help kind of just facilitate conversations? Is it how do you build consistency? That's kind of what the heart of it was, man. Just like how do we one get more men talking about Jesus
Hmm.
and talk about it excitedly and proudly and in a way that shows people like it's not something that like we do occasionally. It's something
Yeah.
that we're actively working on being a foundational part of our life. It is like the first thing, and from that all else things come. Like, we're going to invest in our relationship with Jesus, and from that we're going to have an outpouring into our spouses and our kids, and we're going to lead them in a way that we're called to lead biblically. And I'm going to, whether it's discipline my kids in a way that, the Bible kind of calls me to, or shepherd them towards, a relationship with him, like whatever it may be, like we lead with that versus just us kind of
Hmm.
going off the rock, or just, that was really it, man. Just like, um,
No, and I love it. In the beginning, I mentioned that I think this ministry that you're doing is like literally one that's at the top of the most important list. And the reason why I say that is because I can't remember the stat, and I think we talked about it in your podcast when I came on, but I have to look it up. But the stat is basically saying when mothers are the Christian of the family, like family, mom, dad, and kids. I can't remember. I wish I could get the number, but the likelihood of the kids becoming Christians and following that faith is like a super low
mhm.
percent.
Yep.
Now, when the dad, the father, the man of the house, is a Christian or is the head, the one pushing to go to church, I think it's like a really high percentage in the 80s or
Yeah.
90% range that the whole family is going to become a Christian.
Yeah, I think it's like
So,
5, 6 time X higher. It's not
yes,
even like
yes,
a small percentage, it's like magnitudes higher.
it's
Uh,
ridiculous. And that's why I say like this ministry that you're doing, um, and I know you probably heard this before, but like this that you're doing is changing families, not just lives, not just fathers, not just single individuals. It's changing entire families. And I tell you once, even if one person listens to it and that person is affected in some way, that's it. That's it was all worth it. All
mhm.
the I think you're at 20 something episodes now.
Yep.
All those 20 something episodes are worth it if one person their life change. But yeah, I think us fathers, us dads definitely need guidance, through Jesus, because that is really the way. Not only you can save yourself, but you can save your spouse, you can save your kids. So yeah, man. Again, this ministry that you're doing, I think is one of the most important in uh, in the church, honestly. So yeah.
I appreciate that so much, man. It's a huge encouragement, and I'm beyond grateful. Yeah, man. You know, when I think back, like, when I wanted to gain knowledge in real estate, like, what do people do? You go read books, you read, you go
Hmm.
dive into podcasts. If you want to develop you professionally, people like, there's all these ways that we all go, like, try to like find more knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times when it comes to fatherhood or maybe our faith journeys, like, I feel like it can feel like it's like this isolated personal thing that it's
Hmm.
like how do we kind of break out of that and kind of get into the same like learning from a like it's like podcasts are a way to have like a bunch of mentors in a sense, like,
Hmm.
and and reading books, like, you can learn so much from decades of somebody's life in a couple hours of reading a book. And I think the same thing is like hearing somebody's story, even if it's simple as like just hearing somebody's testimony, I think is so powerful. I'm like a huge proponent of like there's no such thing as a boring testimony. Like
Right.
and because some people like when if they don't have like a prodigal child testimony, they feel like their testimony is boring. I'm like, absolutely not. Every testimony is powerful. It's going to resonate with somebody in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to be a one-to-one relationship to
Right.
like land with somebody, right? A tough time is a tough time. Like whether it's a tumor like I had or just someone who like I don't know, had maybe had a tough childhood in some way, shape, or form. Like
Hmm.
it doesn't matter, right? And so, just I think just hearing men um, talk about it and share that, I just hope resonates. And again, your words are so appreciated.
Absolutely. Yeah. Of course, brother. And I mean them from the heart. But yeah. So you mentioned that you have obviously Erica, your spouse, and you have kids.
Hmm.
How do you? I'm just curious. How do you install these Christian values to your kids? Like what methods you use, or what things you do, you and your wife do, to make sure your kids are guided through the right path. How do you guys do that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of twofold. One, I think it's just like personally walking the walk myself. Like I can talk the
Hmm.
talk, but if I don't walk it, like kids are so perceptive. Like they see through things. Like I think that's one of the biggest eye openers as as my oldest kind of grows up. It's just there's the things you don't realize that they pick up on or they watch or they like realize like they pick up on what your habits are, right? Like
Hmm.
they know what your things are. And so like I try to make a point like if I'm going to sit down and read my Bible, like it's typically in the morning, before my kids kind of start coming downstairs, and like when my son walks down and he sees I got it cracked open reading, like he's usually like, oh, what are you reading? What are you learning about? Right? And it just
Hmm.
like it just fit. And so that's one of them. I think is just walking the walk. The second bolt I think is just creating the environment for your family to thrive from a faith standpoint, and some
Mm.
of that is like making sure that we're at church on Sunday. I know
Right.
it sounds so simple, but man, it's so powerful. Something doesn't have to be complicated to be impactful, and so like you know, making sure that I get them there.
Yeah.
So you make sure my family is there, they're engaged. My kids love kind of going to the youth group. They have a blast. Finding like extracurricular kind of things, maybe through the church that we're a part of. We're in small groups, so we're making sure that like our kids like the point of us getting together once a week is yeah. So you're building a relationship of a group of friends, but we're all like we're either digging into a study or watching a video and we're discussing it,
Hmm.
so we can all make sure that we're growing and learning. And so I think them kind of just seeing all the different ways that we're walking it out too. We're not just like, hey, read this and do this, and because I said so. It's like no, like dad like he's doing the same things he's asking me to
Yeah.
do and so I think that's the big thing, man, is just showing them it's important, like how much it matters to you.
Yeah.
Like I think
Absolutely.
like our pastor always says like things that parents make like optional, kids will just like take to the extreme. So if church is optional, kids will be like, okay, well then that's not important. If reading the word is optional to you, they'll be like, well, it's clearly not that important to be
Right.
a non-negotiable for dad. So like why am I going to make that something that's a priority?
Yeah, and it's just the same thing. I mean, we all have free will. I mean, God doesn't forces us to do things, and that's exactly how we have to be with our kids. You know, we can't force them to do something. We have to teach them how to like it, just like you do.
Mhm.
So I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
So um, I meant to ask you earlier, because I kind of like gave my perspective as to like why men, why fathers, but I meant to ask you why, in from your in your opinion, why men? You know, why fathers? Why didn't you do a a mother? I can't think of a like Faith Forge fathers. I can't think of a great name for mothers, but like why not mothers? Why and why not
Mhm.
the family? You know, why specifically men?
No, I think it's fair. I've kicked it around a couple times in my head because I've had a couple of like my cousins, right, female cousins, who are like, "Oh, like, is your like, I want to check out your podcast, but like, is it for me? Do I need to make it Faith Forge Families, right, or something like that?"
There you
But,
go.
I mean, honestly, it's just I think that one of the most systemic problems in society is fatherlessness,
Mm,
across the board. I think that's one. Like, I think so much can be solved by having active, engaged, present dads and
yeah.
men. Um, so I think that was kind of at the heart of it, just kind of seeing just like I think men just need to like step into leadership roles in their family. They need to take ownership of it. Stop being passive. Don't try to outsource raising of your children, the spiritual leader. Like sure your church may have a wonderful kids program that's supplemental to what you should be doing as the leader of your family, right?
Mhm.
There may be women's groups at church that should be supplemental to you, like making sure that you are leading your wife of like how you were called to do it. And I think it's just kind of like one, it's a conviction myself. Like I'm not doing that well enough. I want to learn from other men who are doing it well, so I can take the knowledge that I'm learning and
Yeah.
pour it into my family. Again, like the podcast wasn't created because I'm like, hey, I'm the guy who's going to teach you how to do. Like, no, like I want to be better at all that stuff because I think it's so fundamentally important for like the health of the nuclear family going forward in society. Like to your, like the stat you referenced earlier, like the
Mhm.
salvation of our children and our grandchildren, and the generational blessing that I think will come from having, like, the head of the household, like really just pouring themselves into developing a relationship with Jesus. I just think is just so paramount right now.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. And uh, let me just point out also that this podcast is called Wealth with Purpose, and I don't think and I said this before. I don't think the only form of wealth is money. A lot of people, when they hear wealth, they think money, but I think one thing that's more important than money is our time.
Hmm.
And the reason, Matt, why I wanted to bring you in this episode is because um, for the most part, I think it's every week you're devoting a lot of time to this podcast. And it's not just a recording, you know, it's not just a conversation. There's a lot of editing that goes in the background. There's a lot of
Hmm.
lighting. I mean, prior to hitting record, me and you were talking about the lighting. I mean, there's a lot that goes into a podcast. And I think, you know, giving your time with purpose is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on here. Because again, this ministry that you're doing on a weekly basis, it's definitely the best spent. It's worth way more than money. So yeah, again, I'm happy that I brought you on here, and I'm glad that you're sharing all of this because I think this is something that can change the world for the better. Um, and while you were speaking, I also thought I was reading a book. I finished reading it a couple of weeks ago. It's called The Consecration of Saint Joseph, and I thought to myself while you were speaking, especially when you were speaking on the portion of your dad, it's like the book basically shows how Saint Joseph is what it should be one of the most respected men out there. And the reason what that is because I'll put an example. Like for example, Matt, if you were to leave your kids off with somebody, who would you leave them with? I mean, you don't have to disclose a name, but if you don't want to, but who would you leave them with? Like
Like
if
like
you,
if something okay, if something happened to me,
yeah, like if something like let's say you had a super emergency and you have to go out of town and you cannot take the kids with you, who would you leave the kids with?
probably my mother-in-law.
Probably your mother-in-law, right? Okay, why would you leave them with your mother-in-law?
She's probably the person who's invested in just that, like, developing relationships with my kids the most.
Right, and this person, I assume, that's one person that you trust
Oh,
to
for
the
sure.
to the world and back, in the moon and back. So the way I see, after reading this book, the way I see Saint Joseph, I mean, Saint Joseph was somebody that God entrusted his son to that person. So there had to be so much trust, so much respect, so much purity in Saint Joseph, in order for God to trust the man who can save humanity to him.
Hmm.
And obviously, the Bible doesn't say much about him, but we can assume a lot, because we know that God is perfect and God does not choose a challenge that we're not able to do. And I think he chose Saint Joseph for that purpose, and that's what that book teaches us. I mean, again, when you were talking, it came to my head, to bring this point. um we man fathers should learn more about Saint Joseph, learn more about the fatherhood, the human fatherhood of Saint Joseph, because I think it's something that can greatly, like you were saying, change your life. Learn about it. Again, I know there's not much in the Bible,
Hmm.
but you can. There's a lot of information out there that you can read, about the earthly father of Jesus. Anywho, moving on to the next topic. Sorry, I just had to
No, no.
got that in there. So uh, I asked in the Calendly invite that I send, what the charities that you are like the most passionate about, and you mentioned Beyond Communities.
Mhm.
What is Beyond Communities? I don't think I've ever heard of it.
So it's a one. I mean, I can be doing more to support the charity more than I have, but it's
Hmm.
something. It's one that I have definitely like. So Pete Hickson, I had him on the podcast.
Hmm.
He is the founder of Beyond Communities, and the purpose behind it is to create, um, like townhomes and
Mm,
communities for the special needs community to be able to live independently.
mm,
Um, so, it kind of it's inspired by one of his daughters, and so he shared on the podcast like one of the biggest challenges for people in the special needs community is, as their parents age,
hmm.
they run into, trouble with people, to be able to sufficiently kind of either
Right.
care for them, and so they usually end up not being able to kind of live the full independent lives that they're capable of, and so he's like on a mission to like build these communities for people in that community to live independently and to
Wow.
thrive and live together, and so they're looking at building, some townhomes, I think, in Georgia right now, so they're trying to, they have some land already kind of, that they're hoping to buy and build on. So part of like the real estate kind of
Yeah.
person to me, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is super cool. But then also just the mission behind it. I've just been trying to, raise as much awareness, for Pete and Beyond Communities as possible.
Well, that's awesome. I've always wondered, like, for folks, that are special needs, like, normally, parents take care of them for as long as they can live, as long as the parents live.
Mhm.
So I've always wondered, like, what happens to those people once they reach a level that nobody can take care of them. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm writing Beyond Communities. I'm gonna have to listen to this episode entirely, because that's so. The reason why I say that is because, so when I first started investing, I was obsessed, obviously, with real estate. That's my my passive income, for a majority of my passive income. And I remember when my wealth was growing and my cash flow was coming in, I was like, I can't just give, I can't just give money. I got to do something physically. I mean, the same thing. I got to use my time, not just my money. And I went online and I looked up what are the biggest needs, in the world right now. And obviously, one of the things that we see the most is, abortions and miscarriages and things of
Mhm.
that sort, of mothers that were not ready. So in my head, I was like, okay, I'm gonna shoot for opening a maternity and birthing center for mothers that can't afford it. That was my goal. But then, as I was maybe like 9 months in the planning, like, I bought a whole bunch of literature that I already read. I already had a plan in place. I was like, but how am I going to be involved? I mean, besides just being a volunteer, how am I going to be involved? So it didn't make really, it didn't really make a lot of sense to me to do that. So what I did was I got to go with something that I'm passionate about. So that way I don't get tired of it.
Hmm,
And what I did was I ended up uh, contacting some folks that do homes in Belize, and eventually I'm part of that board now,
that's cool.
with those folks, because again I love building houses. I mean,
Mhm.
it to me is still very interesting to do that. It's not just about the money, but yeah, I think that's how I'm able to still be passionate about doing that. So there, beyond community is definitely something that I'm interested in, because it's still related in the field that I'm very passionate about, and
Sure.
at the same time you're giving. So I love that. I mean, again, I'm writing this down because I'm definitely gonna probably reach out to Pete. Pete is his name, you said?
Yeah, Pete Hickson. Yeah, he's him and I have, got to exchange a lot of messages over the months since, he's been on, and he's just such a testament to like the power behind like a father with a mission,
Mm,
especially when the mission resonates so much with like improving the life of
yeah,
his daughter and people in similar circumstances. Like it's really awesome.
yeah, that's awesome, man. I'm definitely gonna reach out to him. All right, well, I'm gonna ask a question, and there's no right or wrong answer to this. I'm just curious to see, everybody's take. In your opinion, what is a good Christian?
Oh man, jeez. You're like just a softball
This
here,
is
like, no big deal, man. Like that's
again. There's no right or wrong answer. Just speak from the heart, whatever you think, and I
yeah.
think
I
this
think
question is best to ask it like spontaneously like this, because I really want to know what people you know got in their heart. Because I know you have a good heart, so I know your answer is going to be very powerful.
what is a good Christian? I think it's a person who it is relentlessly pursuing a relationship with Jesus.
Mm,
Like kind of simply, I don't think it is you know the outward things that you do. Like so, I think I mean, the way that we you know, kind of get reconciled with God, right? Is we we believe in our heart that He is Lord, and we confess with our mouth that He
mhm.
that He was raised from the dead, right? That's all we have to do to gain salvation, right? Do grace by faith, lest no man can boast, right? And so, obviously, kind of our works that are kind of the outward things are a manifestation of us having a strong faith. So I think
Mhm.
us starting with just like pouring into that relationship. And whether it's, eh, man, this is an interesting question. I'm trying to like unpack it as I go, but I mean, I don't think it's like you never miss a week of church. I don't think it's those things. I
Right.
think it's the purposeful investment. It's um actively repenting of sin, going and forgiving, and truly making like an all out effort to repent, right? To turn in a different direction and walk in a way and actively try to pursue holiness to the best of your ability, knowing that you will stumble, right? There was only one
Mhm.
infallible, perfect person in the world. We will stumble, but that we are relentlessly pursuing holiness. And when we do stumble, we repent, and we keep just pouring into that relationship. And I think from that, like the good works come, but I think ultimately like he just wants a relationship with us, right? He
Yeah.
wants us to just pursue that with us. And the Bible says like, if you do a good deed or something like that, like do it in privacy. Like don't go tell people about it, right? So like, the Bible's very clear like, if we go do the things that we're supposed to do, then we just go off and like make sure everybody knows we're doing them. Like we're not doing those things for the right reason, right? I think at the heart of it, it's the relationship component, and
Mhm.
from that, like the works and stuff come just as like a flourishing of our strong faith.
Mhm. No, I think that's great. I mean, to piggyback off of what you said, I mean, I think honestly, good Christians are sinners. I mean, for the most part, they're big sinners.
Everybody
Um,
is.
yeah, yeah, and I if I recall a story, a friend of mine, I'm not gonna disclose any names, but a friend of mine told
Just
me
put him on
no,
blast.
no. A friend of mine told me, when he so I help with the teenage youth group at my church, and, my friend, when he got invited by the priest to, like, "Hey, you should, come help out a youth group as well. I think you'd be a great fit." My friend, he was like, "Oh, no, man, you don't want me to help with the kids. Like, I have a lot of sins. I sin a lot, like, on a constant basis." And the priest, who's a mentor of mine, the priest, he said, "You're exactly the people who we need. I mean, people who recognize their sins is the people who we need guiding others." Um, and to me, I mean, I think that was powerful, just by somebody saying that. But yeah, even if you look at the Bible, most of the protagonists of the Bible stories, the majority of them were sinners, like big time sinners. Look at King David, stole somebody's wife, or at least
Mhm.
committed sin by killing him and start speaking. Um, Look at I'm reading actually the book of Jacob, not the book of Jacob, but the story of Jacob in the book of Genesis, where he stole his brother's blessing. I mean, there's again even
Look
the
at
12
look at
disciples.
look at Paul, right?
Yes,
Paul was like
exactly.
Paul literally when Saul was killing Christians, like he was like
Seriously.
actively like persecuting and murdering Christians, and then turns around, thankfully through a miraculous encounter with God, becomes Paul and authors the vast majority of the New Testament,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Like all the letters that we read are authored by someone who in his past was actively
Was the
persecuting them.
worst of the worst, yeah.
Like
Yeah, the
that's
worst of the worst.
incredible.
I mean, if you talk about one of the worst sins, definitely is death. I mean, killing. I mean, and look at that. Today, he's one of the people everybody look up to when it comes
Mhm.
to Christianity. I mean, without Paul, none of us would have been probably Christians, to be honest, because of his works, that's what we're here today. Man, whew, I mean, we can go on forever about this, but excuse me. But no, man, I mean, again, uh, your ministry is one of the things that I admire the most. And I mean, I listen to it like every other episode is I'm listening to it, and then just like you, I'm learning as you go. This is the way you become a good father. I mean, if you want to become a an alcoholic, you hang out around alcoholics. If you want to become a good basketball player, you hang out around people who play basketball. But if you want to become a good father, I would say one of the steps is to listen to podcasts or watch videos or read books that would guide you through that. And I think that's what your podcast do. Um, but yeah, man. Oh, and this is the other thing too. Like, you're not getting rich off of this. I mean,
Oh, no, not
through this podcast, you're not gonna get rich. So it's definitely something that you're doing from the heart. And
yeah,
it
it's
looks like
100% expenses.
that's all there is,
But
right?
I love it, man. Yeah, because I've actually gone through that kinda like because like the podcast is still pretty pretty new. I mean, like, it's only a year old, like, and I think in the grand scheme of things is still, like, infancy. I'm only
Mhm,
26 episodes in. It's like, my listenership is still fairly small, but to, like, what you said, like, I get messages from folks who are like, "Oh, like, that resonated so much," or, like, one I had a buddy who was
mhm,
listening to your episode and texted me and said I paused the episode halfway through because something that Tony said made me feel like I needed to reach out to my best friend from
mm.
the military. He did. His buddy was going through a really traumatic time and was able
Wow.
to, like, be there for him. And, like, without us having that conversation, that doesn't happen. And I'm
Mhm.
like, "Man," like, so, like, I get caught up in metrics and numbers and, I post a new episode and I'm scrolling to see if, like, it's updating, and it never updates as fast as I want it to, but I get caught up on that stuff, but when I answer and I a lot of times, like, I get discouraged a lot
Yep.
because 'cause I'm like, "Man, like, why hasn't this gone viral? Why hasn't, like, this gone?" 'Cause, and I'm like, "Oh, like, is it worth it, man? I'm putting all these hours into it, and, like, it's not growing like I expected it to." And it's always like a perfectly timed message from someone who was just
Yeah.
like, Hey, that was exactly what I needed. Hey, that was a great conversation. Oh, I took something away from it. And I was like, okay, like 100% worth it.
Let's keep going. Yeah, I know. I will say I have a virtual assistant who's editing my content now, and when she first started, it was actually when we had the interview in your podcast, and I sent her the timestamps of the portions that she need to edit because I mean we sat down for like a whole hour,
Mhm.
um, and I'm not gonna put my VA to sit through the whole thing unless they want to, and it happens to be that she listened to like the first couple of minutes and she texted me back, and I can't recall the text message. She was like, "Tony, this is exactly what I needed, and I'm glad I ran into you, and I'm glad I'm editing your content
Man,
because this has really touched me." We didn't get into details because I think it was personal on her side, but I was like, "Hey, I'm just somebody that's God's using in some way, and you too. I mean, I said me, you, Matt. So yeah, I think somewhere somebody's going to be touched by the message from one of the interviews from your podcast. So
just planting seeds.
yeah, exactly. Just planting seeds. And one thing, with these podcasts, these things are supposed to last forever. I mean, Matt, you'll die, and hopefully Spotify or Apple Podcasts and all those platforms are still there to where your podcast still reaching the world in some way.
Sure.
So yeah, man, keep at it. Seriously, I mean it. You're changing the world for the better.
Man, I
So.
feel fired up. I feel like I need to just go shoo.
The fact that you said it's all expenses is hilarious. That's how. I mean, this podcast, I promise you, is going to be all expenses.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of started getting on it and I lost my train of thought, but I go through the thought exercise all the time. Like, what if it does like blow up big? Like, I feel weird about like the idea of monetizing a faith-based podcast.
Absolutely, yeah, me too.
And so like I go through this like real I'm like, well, what about what and so like yeah, it's tough. So I mean my full intention is to keep it that way. And if there ever is any of that kind of stuff that comes along, that it would be things that were for like benefit of people listening,
Yeah.
like and not for, myself to
I thought about the same thing, and definitely, I don't want to monetize this podcast at all. One thing that I do want to do, however, is somehow, maybe later in the future, as the audience grow, um, I had a conversation with one of my mentors when we were in a conference in Denver, and I remember I was telling him, we're supposed to be involved in the community, helping others. We're supposed to be there. And he's like, "No, I don't think so. I don't think that's our job. I think and he opened my eyes to this. He said there are some that are willing to do the work, be there present, but there are others that maybe we can't be present, but we can help monetarily. Or
Mm,
vice versa. I mean, it's just not our thing to be present, but I'll give you here's $1 million to go do whatever you want to do.
sure.
And the way he opened my eyes is like, he's right. I mean, it's not for everybody, but I feel like somebody out there can definitely be a blessing to an organization, to a whole community, to a single person.
Yeah.
So I feel like, and the reason why I say that is because I feel like this podcast eventually, I feel like I'm gonna open, um, hopefully at some point, like donations where people can donate, and I'm gonna physically go show where that money is being put, or somehow show it, whether it's through a screen or whatever that is.
Yeah.
But I want to show that money in the works, so that way they can see that it's actually going 100% to the needed cause, whatever that is.
Yeah. No,
So.
when you were just saying that, kind of like one thing that just kind of popped into my brain is like I don't want to monetize the podcast. I want to mobilize the podcast. Right?
Mhm.
Like you're like I there may be a time where like there is maybe it is a raising of funds for something, but to your point, like it's rally around a cause or a purpose,
Yeah.
and it's not like, oh, I'm just getting some sweet ad revenue. No, it's like I like it's something that we all know is going to like a collective effort. Like, hey, we're all gonna go, try to raise money to give it to Beyond Communities, and we're like whatever it
Mhm.
may be. Um, yeah, so it's about mobilization, not monetization.
Absolutely. And I think when you create the podcast for the first time, Spotify, if you do it through Spotify, the first thing it asks you, "Hey, do you want to monetize? You should do it this way, blah blah blah." And obviously you could skip all of that. That's what I did. But yeah, that's not the intent with this podcast. And like you said, I mean, the plan is to just continue to share love, share faith through this podcast, at least on my end. And that's what we're doing today. If it goes viral, amen, great. That means we get to
Yeah,
reach more people. If it
100%.
doesn't, okay, I'm satisfied with the one person that hopefully their life are touched because of something that I guess like you said. So, well, man, this has been awesome, dude. I appreciate you joining because I know your dad it's now what 9:30 ish, whatever time, or 9:20. And I know on a Thursday night. So I don't know. Did you guys get snowed in Texas?
We did not get snow, but we got abnormally cold temperatures. We were at 14 the other day, and think like there was zero precipitation, but
Oh,
we've been inside. I've been like tending a fire, feeling really manly for the last couple of days. Like there's something about when you have a fire going, like you have to stand by it like constantly, and just like I was like, it's fine, you don't have to keep putting logs on. And I'm like, no, 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 I got this. But no,
that's
and then it
funny.
was 71 today, so
That
it's
is insane.
yeah, it's
Over here we got, what was it, Monday? We got snowed in, and till this day, the whole North Alabama's been shut down. Like literally, I've been working from home. Um, I've only left the house twice this week. And one was to get we didn't want to cook today. Today was one of those days, so we just went out and went to Publix, got some
we have a lot
chicken.
of those days, yeah.
Yeah.
It's parenthood, man.
Hey, yeah, exactly. But yeah, we've been here stuck. So that's why I said, like, it's on a weekday, and I know you probably work tomorrow. So I really appreciate you coming and joining me, man, this late in the podcast. Um,
Oh, 100%, man. I was so grateful, and really just, like, excited when you reached out about being a guest, so glad that we were able to make it happen. Appreciate you being flexible. Yeah, 8 basically, like, 8:30 to 10:30 is, like, my podcast window, and
yeah,
so,
yeah,
yeah, this is usually the money time for me anyway, so it
absolutely.
works
And
out.
you gotta respect family time, man. If not, Erica's gonna come busting through the door. No, but dude, where can people find out more about you? Where can they follow you? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, I'd say the best place to go is just at Faith Forged Fathers on Instagram. That's the podcast Instagram page. My main Instagram's private and not you know not that exciting. So I would just direct people to just at Faith Forged Fathers, and then similarly on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Same thing. Would love for you to follow, listen, leave a review if you like it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, please follow Matt again, especially men, and it's not just for men. I mean, women, families can get a lot out of this as well. So please, everybody, please support, and I think you guys will benefit a lot from a faith standpoint and a personal standpoint from Matt's podcast, Faith Forged Fathers, and we'll put that in the show notes as well, so everybody can go check it out. Well, my brother, I appreciate it, and this has been a blast. I had Josiah on the first episode,
There we
and
go.
it hasn't aired as of this interview. And I said, who would I want second? And I think having you as number two was a no brainer. So,
Dude, that's
but yeah,
awesome.
brother, I appreciate you joining. Thank
All right,
you,
brother.
and
Have a good night, man.
absolutely. Well, thank you, everybody. You can follow me at Ant1234 Moreno, ANT1234 Moreno. And please subscribe on YouTube. Like, that's the way we grow. That's the way we can share the word at Wealth with Purpose podcast. All right. See you guys on the next episode.